The story I am about to tell you still fills me with fear, so I will start by introducing myself. My name is Ethan, and I am currently 30 years old. I live in a small town in the southern United States, far from the house where I grew up. Sometimes the memories of my teenage years haunt me, especially those that revolve around my older brother Ryan, and the woman who changed our lives forever. This is a tale of those dark years, a time that left an indelible mark on my soul. 12 years ago, when I was 18 years old, my brother and I shared a house in our hometown. We were inseparable, united by adversity and fraternal love. Ryan was always my protector and role model. Our parents had died when I was a child, leaving Ryan and me to care for each other. Life in our small home was simple but happy. Ryan worked long hours to support us while I focused on my studies. On weekends, we relaxed by watching movies, playing video games, or simply chatting about our dreams and hopes. It seemed nothing could break our bond. But everything changed when Ryan met Emily. From the moment she entered our lives, something in the air began to feel different. I couldn't identify it at first, but there was an unease, a shadow that slowly loomed over our home. This is the story of how that shadow consumed us. Ryan and I had always been very close. After our parents died, he took on the role of father and brother, working hard to ensure we lacked nothing. Despite the age difference, he was 26 and I was 18. Our relationship was more like comrades than tutor and pupil. We lived in a modest but cozy house in our small town's quiet neighborhood. Our routines were simple. Ryan would get up early to go to work while I prepared for school. In the afternoons, we cooked together and often discussed our days. Those were peaceful and uncomplicated times. One day, Ryan came home with a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. He told me he had met someone special. Her name was Emily, and she was a young woman with bright eyes and a contagious laugh. Although I was happy to see my brother so joyful, I couldn't help but feel a slight twinge of unease, a feeling I couldn't explain at the time. The first few times Emily came to our house, everything seemed normal. She was charming and seemed genuinely interested in Ryan and me. However, as the weeks passed, I noticed small changes. Ryan began to spend more time with her and less with me. Our house, which had always been a haven of peace, started to feel strangely uncomfortable. From the moment Emily began frequenting our home, I started noticing certain behaviors that seemed strange to me. At first, they were minor details, fleeting glances and timid smiles that didn't reach her eyes. But soon, these small signs became more evident. There was something about her presence that made me uncomfortable, as if a dark cloud hovered over us. One night, while we were having dinner, I noticed how Emily constantly avoided eye contact with me. Her attention was entirely focused on Ryan, but her smile seemed forced. When Ryan left the room to take a call, I tried to start a conversation with her. Her response was curt and evasive, which only increased my distrust. Her eyes glinted with a strange intensity, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Another incident occurred when I found her alone in the kitchen. She was facing away, murmuring something under her breath, while stirring a pot with strange contents. She quickly changed her expression to a friendly smile when she saw me, but something in her eyes told me she didn't want me to see her at that moment. From that moment on, I began to suspect that Emily was hiding something dark and sinister. As time went on, these unusual encounters became more frequent. I began to notice that some of my belongings would disappear or change places without explanation. Emily was always around when it happened, and although I never saw her do anything directly, I couldn't help but suspect her. With each passing day, my unease grew, and I felt increasingly uncomfortable in my own home. Emily's presence impacted not only my relationship with Ryan, but also the atmosphere of our house. What used to be a warm and welcoming home began to feel cold and distant. Ryan, who used to be attentive and caring, now seemed distracted and absent. He spent more time away from home, and when he was there, his mind seemed to be elsewhere. I noticed that Emily began bringing strange objects into our house. Black candles, jars of herbs, and sinister-looking amulets started appearing in different corners. When I asked Ryan about it, he dismissed my concerns, saying they were harmless and that Emily was just interested in herbalism and meditation. One afternoon, while cleaning the living room, I found a small notebook hidden behind a piece of furniture. When I opened it, I discovered it was filled with symbols and writings in a language I didn't recognize. I felt a knot in my stomach and decided to confront Emily about it. When I did, she just smiled and said it was only a personal diary of no importance. Despite her words, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. I started to feel watched in my own home, as if there were invisible eyes following my every move. The nights became especially difficult, with shadows that seemed to move in the darkness and unexplained noises that kept me awake. These changes began to affect my health. I became more irritable and anxious, and my studies started to suffer. I tried to talk to Ryan about my concerns, but he was so enamored with Emily that he couldn't see what I saw. I felt more alone than ever, battling a darkness that seemed to consume our house and our lives. As each day passed, Emily's behaviors became stranger and harder to ignore. I often found her murmuring unintelligible words while lighting black candles in different rooms of the house. She seemed to be performing some kind of ritual, always making sure Ryan wasn't around to see it. These actions were alarming and disturbing to me as the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly tense. A noise from the living room abruptly woke me one night. When I went downstairs, I saw Emily sitting on the floor, surrounded by symbols drawn in chalk. Her eyes were closed, and her lips moved quickly as if she were praying in an unknown language. When she saw me, she quickly stood up and, without saying a word, left the room. Fear paralyzed me, and I knew something very wrong was happening. The sense of imminent danger grew stronger. Another time, I found Emily in the kitchen, handling some herbs I had never seen before. The smell was pungent and unpleasant, almost nauseating. When I asked her what she was doing, she responded with an unsettling smile and said she was preparing a traditional remedy. However, her explanation didn't reassure me at all. Instead, it only increased my sense that something dark and sinister was brewing in our house. The ingredients and methods she used were not common. In addition to the herb rituals, Emily also used rag dolls that seemed to represent Ryan and me. I found them hidden in her room, with pins stuck in different parts of her body. When I confronted her, Emily only smiled and said they were protective amulets. But I knew her true intention was to harm us and control our will. This revelation filled me with terror and despair, as it was evident she was using witchcraft to manipulate us. As time went on, strange things began to disappear from our house. First, it was small objects like keys and books, but soon I noticed that larger items like clothes and kitchen utensils were also missing. At first, I thought I was being careless, but soon I realized I wasn't the only one experiencing these disappearances. Emily's influence was evident in every corner, and it seemed she was trying to destabilize us even more. One day, while looking for my notebook for school, I discovered it had disappeared along with other study materials. Desperate, I searched the entire house but found no trace of them. Emily, as always, was nearby and watching, but offered no help. Her presence only increased my frustration and suspicion. I felt more isolated and vulnerable with each passing day. My belongings weren't the only things that vanished. Ryan also began to misplace items, but he seemed less affected by them. When I mentioned the disappearances to him, he simply said it was probably our fault for not being more organized. His indifference to the situation only served to heighten my anguish and sense of isolation. It felt like I was losing control of my own life, and Ryan didn't understand the severity of what was happening. One night, after a particularly difficult day, I found Emily in my room. She was standing in front of my desk, holding a book I had been searching for weeks. When I asked her what she was doing, she looked at me with an expression that mixed pity and contempt. Without saying a word, she placed the book on the desk and left the room. That was the first time I felt genuine fear for my and Ryan's safety. The nights began to turn into torture for me. Terrifying nightmares that seemed too real assaulted me every time I closed my eyes. I dreamed of a dark figure, a faceless man, who chased me through endless corridors and unknown rooms. I always woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding frantically. I felt trapped in a cycle of fear and despair from which I could not escape. I began to notice that these nightmares coincided with Emily's nightly rituals. One night, after waking from a particularly terrifying dream, I found her in the living room, murmuring words in an unknown language while burning herbs in a small cauldron. Her eyes shone with a sinister intensity. I realized she was using witchcraft to invade my dreams and weaken me mentally. Her rituals seemed to have a clear objective: to destroy my inner peace. The nightmares and constant state of alertness began to affect my health. I became increasingly paranoid, fearing to close my eyes because of what I might find in my dreams. The lack of sleep and constant stress began to take their toll, leaving me weak and vulnerable. I knew I needed to find a way to stop Emily before she managed to destroy me completely, but I didn't know who to turn to for help. I lost weight quickly, my eyes sank, and my skin took on a pale, sickly tone. My classmates and teachers noticed the change, but I couldn't explain to them what was really happening in my house. I knew Emily was behind my deterioration, using her witchcraft to weaken me. I felt trapped, with no way out. Emily also started leaving potions and brews in the kitchen, insisting that Ryan and I drink them. She said they were health tonics, but every time I took them, I felt worse. I started having dizziness, nausea, and a feeling of heaviness in my body. I tried to avoid her potions, but Ryan, under her influence, pressured me to drink them, believing in Emily's false promises. The situation was becoming increasingly untenable. Finally, my physical and mental state reached a critical point. One afternoon, while trying to get out of bed, I felt severe dizziness and collapsed on the floor. Everything went black, and the last thing I remember is the feeling of falling into an endless abyss. I knew I needed help, but I wasn't sure who to turn to. I was alone in my fight against a darkness I didn't fully understand. The desperation and loneliness were overwhelming. My health continued to deteriorate, and I reached a point where I could no longer attend school or perform my daily activities. I spent most of my time in my room, with the curtains closed and the door tightly locked. The daylight seemed unbearable, and the silence of the night was terrifying. I felt trapped in a prison of my own creation, not knowing how to escape. I needed to find a solution before it was too late. The atmosphere in our house grew increasingly oppressive. One day, while cleaning the basement, I found a small altar hidden behind some old boxes. I covered it with a black cloth and adorned it with black candles, strange figures, and photos of Ryan and me. A chill ran down my spine, and without thinking twice, I covered the altar again, making sure Ryan didn't see it. I knew this altar had a dark purpose, and it terrified me to think about what Emily might be doing. Emily performed her rituals in secret, but I observed some of her methods. She used black and red candles, lighting them in a specific order while murmuring words in an unknown language. There was also a ceremonial dagger, stained with what looked like dried blood, which she used to trace symbols in the air and on her skin. Her movements were precise and deliberate, as if she were following a carefully planned recipe. Every time I saw her in the middle of these rituals, I felt a growing panic, knowing her intentions were not good. I began to suspect that Emily had a larger plan in mind. She seemed to be trying to weaken Ryan and me, both physically and mentally, in order to better control us. Her goal could be to take over our house, separate us as brothers, or do something even more sinister. Every time I found a new clue to her dark practices, my conviction that she was trying to destroy us grew stronger. I couldn't let her witchcraft destroy our lives, but I didn't know how to stop her. Finally, I gathered the courage to talk to Ryan about what I had seen. I told him about the altar and the rituals, hoping he would understand the gravity of the situation. However, his reaction was one of disbelief. He looked at me as if I were crazy and dismissed my concerns as childish superstitions. His rejection hurt me deeply, but I couldn't give up. I knew I had to find a way to open his eyes before it was too late. I tried to show him the evidence, the missing objects, the changes in the house, and my physical deterioration. But Ryan's love for Emily blinded him. She had poisoned his mind against me, and nothing I said seemed to make him change his opinion. I felt more alone than ever, fighting against a force I couldn't see or fully understand. Desperation took hold of me, but I knew I had to persist. One afternoon, while Emily was out, I took Ryan to the basement to show him the altar. However, when we arrived, the altar had disappeared. In its place were only the old boxes and dust. Ryan was furious, accusing me of trying to sabotage his relationship. I couldn't believe what was happening. It was as if Emily knew my every move and was always one step ahead. Frustration and helplessness overwhelmed me even more. After that confrontation, our relationship became even more strained. Ryan distanced himself more and more, spending almost all his time with Emily. I, on the other hand, felt the house was suffocating me. I needed to find a way to get rid of Emily and the darkness she brought with her, but I didn't know where to start. The situation was becoming increasingly desperate, and my health continued to deteriorate. Desperate for answers and seeking a solution, I remembered my grandmother's stories about healers who helped people get rid of bad energies and evil spirits. Although I was skeptical, I felt I had no other option. That same night, a family friend recommended a healer to me. I needed answers, and I hoped he could give them to me. The healer was an older man with a kind face and penetrating eyes. He received me in his modest home, filled with herbs, candles, and amulets. I explained everything that had been happening: Emily's strange behaviors, the unexplained noises, the unsettling shadows, and the altar in the basement. He listened attentively without interrupting, occasionally nodding while taking notes in an old notebook. His calm demeanor gave me a bit of hope. After listening to my story, the healer asked me to show him something that belonged to Emily. I gave him a small necklace she had left in the living room. He examined it carefully, murmuring words in a language I didn't understand. Then, with a serious expression on his face, he revealed that the object carried a dark energy that was not of this world. His words confirmed my worst fears. Emily was using witchcraft to manipulate us. The healer began preparing a cleansing ritual. He lit candles and burned incense, filling the room with a strong medicinal aroma. He gave me several amulets and a bottle of dark liquid, instructing me to spray the house with it and carry the amulets all the time. According to him, this would help protect me from Emily's malevolent influences and the dark presence she brought with her. Before I left, he warned me that the fight wouldn't be easy. The forces we were dealing with were powerful and wouldn't give up without a fight. When I returned home, I waited for Emily and Ryan to leave before starting the ritual. I sprayed every corner of the house with the dark liquid, reciting the words the healer had taught me. I felt a slight improvement in the atmosphere, as if the air had become a little less dense. I hung the amulets on doors and windows, hoping they would act as barriers against the dark energy. The feeling of relief was palpable, but I knew I couldn't let my guard down. Over time, Ryan began to notice the strange occurrences in the house. He started to observe the missing objects, the changes in my health, and Emily's increasingly erratic behavior. One night, after hearing unexplained noises and finding symbols drawn in chalk on the living room floor, Ryan finally understood the gravity of the situation. His disbelief turned into concern and fear. Ryan confronted Emily about her rituals and behavior. She tried to defend herself, but the evidence was overwhelming. After an intense argument, Ryan decided to end his relationship with Emily and asked her to leave the house. Although Emily left, her malevolent influence didn't disappear. Strange things continued to happen, but Ryan and I still felt her presence. Desperate to end the nightmare, Ryan and I decided to visit the healer together. We told him everything that had happened, including the confrontation with Emily and her departure. The healer explained that although Emily was no longer physically present, her rituals and dark energy could still affect us. He recommended that we perform a deeper cleansing ritual to break the remaining bonds and free our house from her influence. The healer prepared a total purification ritual, which included burning sacred herbs, reciting protection prayers, and placing new amulets throughout the house. Ryan and I actively participated in the ritual, following the healer's instructions to the letter. As we performed the ritual, I felt a sense of relief and hope. I knew we were on the right path to regain our peace and safety. The feeling of unease persisted despite our efforts and the healer's powerful purification ritual. Even though Emily had left, her intangible presence continued to hover around us. Sometimes when I walked through the town, I would see her from a distance. In those moments, an inexplicable chill ran through my body, and the fear would take hold of me again. Her gaze always found mine, and although we exchanged no words, the message was clear. Her influence was still present. Over time, Ryan and I managed to rebuild our lives. The house became lighter and more welcoming, and our fraternal relationship strengthened after everything we had faced together. However, the emotional scars remained. On quiet nights, when the wind whispered through the windows, we both remembered the dark days with Emily and wondered if we were truly free from her shadow. We had regained our peace, but doubt always lingered in the air. To this day, Ryan and I reflect on everything that happened. We wonder if we are really at peace, or if Emily's rituals still affect us in ways we can't comprehend. The experience taught us to be cautious and value each moment of tranquility, knowing that darkness can lurk in any corner. Although we have learned to live with our doubts, we remain vigilant for any sign that Emily's shadow has not entirely disappeared, and the fear still haunts us to this day. I really hope you liked this tale. I am thrilled to share these stories with you. Share this video with others so that we can keep growing and more stories can reach more people. Kindly provide your thoughts and experiences in the comments section. It will aid in my further development. If you like the video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Many thanks, and I hope to see you again soon.